I'm finally going to get a chance to talk more thoroughly about this Grundig Traveler 2 7-band radio. I've posted a couple of videos about this before, which I'll link in the description below. I think I'm going to open this up so we can have a look inside. I'm a little nervous doing that because this is in very nice shape, but I'll talk a little bit about how this works, that sort of thing. And this is an early 90s design. I think this one is 92 or so, because it came with a 91 guide. It's a late 80s, early 90s design anyway. It's got an analog 7-band radio, 5 shortwave bands. It does cover most of what you want, although for here in North America, there are a few things that's missing that you might want, and the bands do cut off a little bit early, but it gets most of what you want, and it would have certainly covered the broadcast range in the late 80s, early 90s quite well. It's got a world clock on it, which hopefully you can see, and you can see, so you can set the world timer to whatever you want. It's got a summer setting, so if you were to set it for New York on the summer setting, we would get 1526, which is of course the same time Eastern Daylight Time here in Toronto as well. That's pretty convenient. Doesn't work in Newfoundland, which is half an hour off, but out here you can switch which time, so you can put the world time on top and the home time, and it's got an alarm and the usual stuff. And it'll wake. It's got what they call humane wake system, which is not Sangean, so I do wonder if this was made by Sangean for Grundig. This was before the Grundig buyout, I believe, and it's also, I know most Eaton stuff is made by Texan, but Texan didn't exist when this was manufactured, so I wonder if maybe Sangean made it, because humane wake system is their branding, if I remember correctly. Other than that, it's a fairly straightforward radio. It's got a stand, which if you've looked at my discussion of the Texan PL330 is a bit of a bugaboo of mine. It uses 3 batteries. One powers the clock, and these 2 power the radio, so you can undo the radio separately from the clock. There's evidence of maybe some slight battery leakage in mine here, but I don't actually think there are any screws in this, so I'm going to leave the batteries in for the moment. Just put that back on. This one is, as I said, just about perfect. It's got the, the sticker still on the antenna. It's got a DC 3-volt in for the radio. I don't think that provides the 1.5 volts for the clock. It's got a headphone out. It's mono as far as I can tell. It's got late 80s, early 90s slide style volume control. The argument for getting into it would be to mainly to get some contact cleaner in that, which is a bit noisy. It's got a very nice light tuning knob, which makes it very pleasant to tune around with. I was hoping to get up the schematic, but my internet has become unreliable, and I probably need to go down and reboot the downstairs router, but we'll do that later. So I think it's a fairly straightforward radio. I think in terms of performance, it's about equivalent to something like like the inexpensive analog Texans, right? What is it, the 9020 or something like that? I have referred to it elsewhere. I think it feels very much like that in terms of ease of use. The sensitivity is about like that. It's not super. Medium wave, I haven't played with a whole lot. FM, This overloads here in Toronto a little bit. It actually does better on FM if you leave the antenna down. So we may be quite sensitive outside this environment. But yeah. One thing that's nice is when you switch the band switch, I don't know how well this is going to show on camera. I'll zoom in a little bit more. Is that when you flip the band switch around, it's got a nice little flag. And it goes away when you're in FM. So for all the AM bands, you've got a little flag here on the right which shows you which band you're with. Pretty well thought out in terms of usability. So Grundig, of course, was bought out by Eaton, which kept the Grundig name for a while, then did joint Grundig Eaton branding, and I don't know who owns Eaton. I don't follow all that stuff or really care. The current Traveler 3 has the same kind of dial and has a digital radio without a keypad and no single sideband. So it's like not a super interesting radio to me, but it might be, and it's relatively inexpensive. So it might be a good choice if the clock is an important part of your use of the radio, because this clock's actually really convenient. You know, you travel to, let's pick somewhere. You travel to, well, say Istanbul, right? Do they do summertime and daylight savings time in Istanbul, right? Anyway, and then you flip the clock over so the world's on top, and you know you're in your travel mode. It's like the clock's really well thought out. I would prefer a switch for summer rather than this, but that would have probably required another set of contacts on the switch. Now, I'm going to consider opening this up. I just wanted to have a look here and see. This is so nice. I don't really want to do anything. So they're going to be under these feet. Let's see. Can we get, well, this one we don't have to cut off. There should presumably be, and there isn't a screw under there. Maybe they're not under the feet. We have one screw there. Do you think it comes apart with one screw and snaps? That would be a bit disappointing if it is. This likely is just for the antenna. I don't see any screw up here. Can we get the volume knob off? Yep. The volume knob comes off easily enough. All right, well, I'm going to have a look, and well, maybe I'll do that. Let me reach over and get the screwdriver. That one will do. And as I crash my knee into the desk here, I'll take that out. One very long screw. And okay, I'm going to take the batteries out. I will say the clocks are a bit of a pain to set on this. Well, not really, but you know, there are two of them. So I was kind of hoping to leave the battery for the clock in. You'll see. If I put the clock battery back in, you'll see the clock's on, but of course the radio won't work because there's no battery for that. Okay, let me find this budger and let's have a look. Maybe start on the bottom here. Yeah, I'm going to shut this off and have a look at opening it up and see where it takes me. Well, that was easy. And there's not even a wire to the antenna. So one screw and yeah, just a little prying to get it started. I got one of these, this one in the corner released and then came up. There's no tab there, so they're just 1, 2, 4. Oh, it's on the side here by the antenna. That makes sense. So just 4 tabs, fairly beefy plastic, and it hasn't gotten brittle yet. So a lot easier than opening a Sony Walkman. All right, so let's see what we can see inside. It's a one-chip design. I'll zoom in a little bit. The chip says Sony on it. Let me find a magnifier and I'll see if I can tell you what that is. Yeah, it says Sony CXA191M, as in Michael. I have no idea about the date code on that. So it uses a Sony chip. And we've now got a circuit board held in by 4 clips. Do I dare attempt to release these? The problem with this clipped in stuff is that as soon as you release one, you get all of them. What have we got? Oh, we've got... Okay, let's do it from this side. Actually, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to leave the board in. There we go. So it looks like the whole tuner mechanism comes out. I will say the one thing that is broken on this is this little tab that holds this closed. It had been glued before I got it. It came off. I glued it again, but the angle's not quite right, and I'm kind of okay with that because the glue's never as strong as the original plastic. I hate the design of consumer electronics that uses tiny little catches like that for doors and things. They always break eventually, right? Long before you've hit the end life of the rest of the thing. One thing I note is that there's a nice long, well, you know, maybe 4 inches long anyway, antenna there. Does this dial come off? Actually, it looks like this whole clock unit lifts out. So what do we need to release here? Just this? Is there any clips down here? Oh, so there were. Let's try it again. Maybe down here. All right, here we go. What do we got? Okay, we've got the speaker. All right, let's see if we can get this out. Okay, I think that might be it. Let's see. Okay, to go any farther, I've got to desolder the speaker. Do I want to do that? Yeah, why not? Okay, give me a second. I'll desolder the speaker. So I've desoldered the speaker, and I used my little butane soldering iron to do that because I didn't feel like waiting for the other one to heat up. This is great for that sort of thing, but hot air comes out of these little sides on it, so you've got to be a little careful about, you know, where that goes on the board. With these sorts of things. All right, so if we flip it over, we've got a clock module, which is entirely separate from the radio module. We've got 3 wires that come in. There's a plug, but I'm not going to, I think, undo it. We've got fairly straightforward routing, and then if we wanted to get in more, we'd have to clip off this plastic front plate, and I don't think I'm going to do that because I'm afraid of messing with this very little dial cord. This one, you'll notice, is glued on. The pointer's glued on to that, as opposed to the concerto radio that radio from 1970 that I worked on, which had a little bit of paint to hold it on. This is, you're not expected to get this off and back together, I don't think. We can peek inside a little bit though, and what do we see? We see an analog radio, right? We see the tuning condenser down in there. We see some rather nicely made little inductors here, none of that coil of wires floating around garbage. We've got, this is where the screw ran through. We can see at least one transformer inside there. This is probably the big power electrolytic for the whole thing, for the amplifier circuit, because that's where the audio output is. Yeah, that's it. Not all that much to see. The construction is clever, and we've got a single chip and its associated parts. So you can sort of see where the transformers are here. Is that one there, maybe? And usually with these analog chip radios, you've got a lot of inductors. We've got a decent sized rod antenna down here with a couple of sets of windings on it, as you would expect for an analog radio. A little bit of tape. This was the speaker output that I unsoldered before. So that's it. That's all there is to it. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot, really. Might be interesting to look at the clock more, but we can see a little bit here. And we can see that that's got a single chip there. Opus 1003. That says 2K2 1287. Is that the 12th month of 87? In which case, this chip anyway is far older than I thought the whole radio was. And we've got a bad capacitor, which I think I'm going to replace. Look at that. Can I get this plastic front off? We've got 1, 2, 3 screws. This is, see these test points here? This is probably, maybe try to get this up. That's probably this switch here. Most of this radio is going to be that switch. Let's see if I can lever that up. Drastically reduce my chance of getting more than fingerprints on the dial. Okay, so what have we got here? We've got I don't know what that is. Red, black, brown. Anyway, I think this will unsnap. Yeah, so we've got the clock switch, which works exactly like the range switch on a multimeter. We've got single chip. We've got contacts for the switches. You know what? I don't think that capacitor's leaked. I think what we're looking at is we're looking at a little bit of battery leakage that's come through. Because the other thing we have is a battery terminal here. Where is this relative to the battery? This is sitting on top here. Yeah, this is directly over the battery. Here. But you wouldn't think it would get in there, but it's down like it's down like that. Why would it get on this side here? Yeah, I'm going to change it. I'm going to change this capacitor. Okay, that means I've got to get the other soldering iron on. I'm not trying that with this chain thing, is not appropriate for that. So I'm going to pause and I will be right back. So what I did before I did anything else, as you can see by the puddle that's remaining, is that I hosed this down with the contact cleaner. And what you can see, if you zoom in, is that there is a fair amount of pitting on these pads here. I'm not going to touch them; they're working, but I mean, touch them beyond that. I also cleaned around this little capacitor. I can't. Can I read what it is? 16 volts, 10 micro. Okay. So I probably have one of those. Well, I certainly have one of those. I might even have a good one. So, yeah, there's not a lot of space there. I don't think this is what's leaked. I think it's this one. So let's see if we can desolder that easily. I'll just, all right, let me, to make sure I remember, I'll just put some red on that side. Oh, but that's the wrong side. We'll put some black on that side for the, to remind us that that's, or to remind me. I'll put some red over here. Which way around the capacitor goes when installing a new one. Okay, soldering iron's up pretty high, which is good for this sort of stuff. And you can see this one, there's been oxidation on the back of this, so you can see that the solder is not sticking to it at all. This one's not so bad. I'm going to go get some flux, and we'll just put a little bit of flux around that, which will maybe help our cause a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to use the wiggle it out method here, and then try to clean up the pads after. I'm sorry if that was off camera. So I'm just heating each one. There we go, there's one out. And I heat that one. There we go. So there's our capacitor, and you can see, I'll zoom in as much as I can. I have no idea if that's in focus, but you can see that it's definitely leaked out the bottom, right around there. Okay, so I'll try to clean up these pads so we can solder the new one in place. I don't have quite all the tools out and organized the way I like, because I wasn't planning on doing any of this. All right, so here are our, get a little more room, so I'm less likely to go out of the shot. Nope, almost. This is kind of a bit of a three-handed job. Do it from the other side. No, I had that one. Sometimes the solder sucker works better. There we go. No, this bottom one is still trying to defeat me. There we go. Just a question of a bit of patience. Okay, so now we've got the two holes cleared up. The traces look fine. So I will go find a capacitor and be right back. I wanted to use one of these nice Nishikon caps, but it's so much bigger than the original. These are, what are these? I don't remember what voltage, 25 volts. These aren't mini ones though, so we'll use a no-name cheapie, 10 microfarad. Really, I think that all this is doing is, let's see, where is it? I think it's just providing a bit of power isolation for the clock circuit or something. I don't know. Okay, so that then goes in here like that. We marked, I've got it backwards. We marked positive there, negative there. So that's in position. Bend those slightly. We'll solder those in, and then I'm going to reassemble the radio. So then this is fairly straightforward. Okay, let's see how we did. A little bit too much on those, but that'll be all right. Clip off the leads, and there we go. One new capacitor that's not leaking. It's been cleaned up more or less. So now we just have to get this back together. I'll zoom out again. Sorry for all the zooming. I always have mixed feelings about whether that's a good idea or not. All the switches are in place. I'm going to test this capacitor after this is done so that I can decide how necessary this whole thing was. Okay, so we have some screws to put in. 1, 2, I think. And then one there. And now I'm not remembering where the screws were. One there. One there. And one there. I remember there was one right by the chip. Yeah, that's got to be it. Okay, well, we'll know when we try to put them in. Just be careful. So you can feel the threads. Hear that? I learned that trick from a friend of FranLab, that if you go backwards, you can feel the threads, and then you don't cut new ones with a self-tapping screw, thereby improving the lifespan of your device in case you ever want to open it again. Okay, so we know this goes on. This battery terminal for this side goes through. But we probably want to get this in here. I'm not very good at these little connectors, I've got to say. They always kind of flummox me a little bit. Maybe we'll put the connector in first and then worry about everything else after. Okay, connector's in. Battery piece has to go in. The rest of this just, well, it's really held in when the whole thing's put together. Okay, I've got fingerprints on the dial. Just make sure. That seems to be working. Let's put a battery in the clock and see. We have that. Oh, let me try that again. Sorry, I was off camera. So I put a battery in the clock. I haven't set it, of course, but you can see forward minute buttons. Those probably work. Home world switch, that works. It's trying to set that, and that's for the whole radio as a whole. Okay, so I'm going to find a microfiber cloth. That's one. Move this over here. My guess is most of this won't show because you have to be at an angle to see it, but the last thing you want on a radio is to see a whole bunch of fingerprints on the dial. We'll do that. The rest of this was accessible, so it doesn't need to be done now. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that. So that means we need to put this on and feed this wire through. goes on. Okay, this is all fine, but we've got to okay, there we go. So let's see. We've got the dial. Ah, but I didn't clean the inside. So let's get this off again. Yeah, so this is the way I got it off before. There we go. So what I forgot to do was clean the inside of, do you call it a dial glass if it's plastic? We'll call it the dial glass, because that's going to be irritating as well if that's covered in fingerprints and assorted schmutz. So, get back to this. Okay, everything seems back in place. Not quite. And there we go. Dial looks okay. Not perfect, but we'll live. Okay, so the next thing to do is to reattach the speaker, which was right there. And again, I marked red because that's red on there. Of course, with speakers, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, which is which. There's a big pad and a fairly small tip on the iron. Okay, well, that's on there. A little bit concerned about, it's looking a bit of a mess up here. Okay. Oh. What's going on here? Oops. That's all right. Get this over here. That looks a little better. I'll put a little bit of fresh solder on here. Mainly just to make sure it's got some flux on it. Okay. It's looking a bit grody, but let's put some batteries in and see if the radio works.
Cycle and consider then.
So, radio works. It's all together. We just got to get these batteries out. We'll take all of them out. Maybe wipe down the inside of that a little bit. Okay, so that's on. And then it's a question of screw that I've now lost right here. And that goes in here. Knob goes back on. Oh, you know what I forgot to do while I was inside? Was spray contact cleaner on the volume control. Oh well. Now we got batteries in it. We can put the battery box together. And, oops, drive the batteries in correctly. Ah. Zoom out a little bit. I'm not sure any of that was visible. Something's going on with the battery connection. What have I got wrong? This one goes this way. Like that. This one goes like that.
You know, economic inflation, recession risk, that's kind of hurting airline stock.
All summer long. Shop today for Figaro mulch.
Okay, it was just a question of getting the batteries in properly.
You won't be beat on every
And there we go. Okay, so the radio is fixed. It needs a little wipe up on the outside now, but that's expected. So let's have a look at this capacitor. Now I will look for this, which you've probably seen before if you watched this channel before. This is a, I can't remember, GM328A component tester. I don't think it's terribly accurate in terms of the values it gives you for stuff, but they're inexpensive and they're great for trying to figure out what you got in front of you. So let's try this, 30-cent capacitor, and we'll see what it does. Okay, so 10 micro, ESR is not very high, right? So that meets its specs here, right? I think these are 20%. Let's try this one that I took out. I don't think that'll fit in there, but we could probably do it this way by holding it against these little solder pads. So it's actually fine. So despite the fact that it looks like it leaked all over the place, maybe what I'm seeing around it wasn't the capacitor, maybe it's the remains of the battery leakage from before. Interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my little repair, perhaps unnecessary, of the Grundig Traveler 2. As I've said, I really like this radio. I was very happy to have had a look inside. Oops, that's better. I had one of the clips wasn't entirely clipped. That's probably why the batteries were acting up a little bit before.
With the latest devices, mobile plans, and much more.
I do like the tuning indicator on the LCD here. It's neat. It makes the clock feel more integrated into the radio than a lot of analog radios are. So thanks for following along with me. If you have all this way through this little repair of this Grundig, yeah, I suspect that capacitor was probably okay, but it sure looked like it had leaked to me. Like the bottom of it, if you compare, it looks a bit bulgy, but I mean, it's so small, it's hard to tell. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little look into this radio.